Om Haranmaye Parikoshe Virajan Brahmaniskalam Tachu Brahm Jyoti Sham Jyoti Tadyadatma Vito Vidhu Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Shining like burnished gold, highest and deepest, the core intelligence of living beings, partless and indivisible, ever pure, free of all taint, the essence in all which all beings seek, knowingly or unknowingly. There shines Brahman. It is that which the Guru teaches. It is that which the wise ones exult in. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. And it is that Brahman which we gather to discuss at sacred events like Satsang, which is recommended by the luminaries. And we welcome you here to SRV Loka, which has to be these days relegated mostly to an online screen image of each other. Although we will be heading towards the mainland, making a bold foray into the Maya of airports and cities, and trying to see it all as Brahman, taking the Divine Mother as our protection. And we'll be there amongst you in a few weeks, less than that now, but the retreat at Windward Waters is coming up. We're going to study section 2 and 3 of the Annapurna Upanishad, because we've done many of the Mother Upanishads already. There's some 7 or 8 of them that I can tell out of the 108. So rather than just sticking to the main Upanishads, which are really enough to do our manana, our mental ruminations on, we're moving into some of the what's affectionately called minor Upanishads, because Shankara didn't have enough time in his 32-year-old amazing life to comment on all of them. He just did maybe 10, possibly 11, they say. And so it's different times of the day, and where we are here, this group, we're gathered here in Hawaii. It's bright, sunny day, all blue sky, and early in the morning. And the beautiful thing about starting the day here in Hawaii off, or any day, wherever anyone is that to talk about the Dharma is to actually entertain the Atman within us, and to invite Divine Mother Reality and her wisdom into our hearts and minds. Just speaking about it alone is what I'm trying to say, is auspicious enough. What to speak of entertaining it in the mind later in your own reflections, and taking counsel of the seers via the sacred scriptures of India. Guru Anushasana and the Vidya Shastras, that's called. Those are 3 of the 3 great proofs of truth. The third one being your own direct spiritual experience, aparoksha anubhuti. That's also a teaching that Shankara focused on, those 3 things. If you can put together contemplation of the scriptures with the guidance of Guru, Dharma, and Sangha, that triple gem, and then gain your own spiritual experience out of it, then you're moving inward in a well-guided trajectory, And you actually have a spiritual life, which I must say is probably very rare amongst the greater percentage of humanity on this planet, in this realm these days, because beings are blocked by a lack of flow of prana and thoughts towards the internal worlds, and also focus too much on the physical, and have overlooked or do not see yet the subtle body. That's called the stula sharira, the gross body and all its functionings and external things, and then the sukshma sharira. There's also a karana sharira, that is a causal body that we have, sort of evinced by deep sleep we go into at night, where we actually get close to that formless essence. But there's still a veil over that, they say. And so when we go into Shushupti, that's called, then we're in this kind of bliss, but not aware of it. And then we come out into dreaming, and that's called swapna. And there we're playing with it, as it were, forms, names, worlds. And it's rather intermittent, as dreams tend to be. And the continuity only really seems to come back in our waking state, at least for some half of the day, from 12 to 16 hours that we're awake. And that's where we have this opportunity to neutralize karmas. In Vedanta, that would just be called dissolving the mind stream. Buddhism, too, thinks of it that way, that whatever rises in the day, you might say, even in an average, everyday, normal life, that it needs to be dissolved, at least those things that collect around it. Sri Krishna used the example of a ship that gathers barnacles on it. So the mind's kind of a sailing ship that moves through these three worlds with its three bodies, and it's going to gather barnacles along its hull. A real nightmare to the shipping industry, even up to this day, I hear, if you want to look at it in reality, how many millions of dollars are spent on scraping those little buggers off. But it's a very good analogy for our own minds. And so day by day practice, sadhana it's called, and counsel with Guru, Dharma, Sangha, and scriptures, and your own direct experience. All these things is what I start this satsang off with today. A well-regulated spiritual life that's going to progress and go somewhere is based upon such as those things. So just speaking about the Dharma ushers those in, and otherwise, you might say one of those types of barnacles that gather on our mind is just forgetfulness. Is that we think maybe life is fine in a sattvic period, and then rajasic period comes, restlessness, and or activity done fraught with infringement by all those Maya things out there that we know so well. And then tamas comes after that, when we're exhausted and have to sleep. So these cycles, these gunas, they're called, to try and balance them out, sort of like you would do with your breath in early yoga, in breath, held breath, out breath. We want to equal those out so that we breathe in like for 8 counts, and then hold for 8 counts, breathe out for 8 counts. It's a basic breathing exercise, but in Vedanta or Vedic breathing, you're going to attach that to the mantra that you say, or to the Gayatri. Quite often they use the Gayatri, Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha, and so forth. So these things are very important to a well-regulated spiritual life, and they need to be done daily in order to balance life and mind, and to purify those 3 bodies, and to open channels, nadis they're called, into the three worlds and beyond, because getting beyond sattva and getting beyond the need for practice into the actual experience. Sometimes that's called anugraha. And so the anubhava and anugraha is good too, because that's grace. So basically, you get into that graceful life, which is balanced. And that's where, as Krishna says in the Gita, you breathe without breathing, as the Upanishads say, and you're in the body, in the world, but not of it, as they say nowadays. So these are all wonderful thoughts to entertain, jewels in the Dharma, and it goes much deeper and much further, as you know. Even if you take a look at that book SRV put out at Footfalls of the Indian rishis, and how rich the Dharma is. And that book probably only touches on a part of it. There's a beautiful song in India that says, the six darshanas can never reveal the extent of Mother's wisdom. So, the six darshanas are Vedanta and Yoga and Samkhya and so forth. Those are the orthodox ways in India. And they cannot reveal her, but she reveals them. Nevertheless, she herself doesn't even know the extent of her own wisdom. So those beautiful thoughts have been put down in songs, bhajans and stotrams they're called. And to give us an idea maybe that there's just an infinite amount of deep wisdom present. And then they tell us that it's also present within us, if we can just accent it, open those nadis, those nerve channels, which the subtle body has, as well as the physical body. The physical body, basic yoga, we know that breathing and pure foods and some exercise and so forth help that. But the mind also has to be open to deeper things, as is instanced by the world and its vagaries and vicissitudes and its ills, based on limited thinking, the karma that comes from all of that, not only on the individual level, but on the collective level that we're seeing today. It tends to pile up like a traffic jam in human consciousness, and there's no outlet. So maybe here a better word would be inlet. If we can let this mother wisdom in, sort of like water into a great bay, and feel the flow of life force again, the way we used to when we were younger, or when the world was experiencing these heights of pure religion, rather than the end of cycles, as we have today in the Kali Yuga and so forth. Then this light would visit us daily, and we would be open to it, and we would see it, and we would live in it, move in it. And as the chants that I started off with today, Haran Maye Pare Koshya Virajan Brahman Nishkalam, everything would be shining like burnished gold. And we would see the highest and the deepest at the same time. And the shallows would be not so attracting to us anymore. Certainly we wouldn't obsess with them. So all of these are thoughts in the Dharma, given at Satsang, from Hawaii, here where some of us are residing, and transmitting it out there to places in the world that all of you are living in, and joining in with us. So maybe you can join in then with some questions you've had from your readings, or some insights you've gotten from your meditations. Everything is fair game in the Dharma, as we keep our minds fixed on Brahman. And we will soon head towards the God blogs in a little while. I've put another 5 wonderful God blogs up from Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. So, who's going to start with some participation in this satsang? It's supposed to be about the Sangha joining in. Who's going to strike the theme? Usually at each satsang, I look back on or remember, there's always a kind of theme that comes forward when we voice some precious things out of our spiritual life and share them.
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste.
Namaste, Imre.
Well, the introduction, well, Babaji, it always happens that the introduction, your introduction answers lots of points immediately. I've been pondering upon exactly the life force prana and how the mind is related to these bridges, these very fine relations, and also from pondering upon from my studies in my everyday routine studies regarding the my research work, the role of language games, and how at all these different relations are available. And it's amazing to see this unity, which is sort of rediscovered at the end of the postmodern age, relating to the idea, or rather to say an approach, to see this fine unity of being flowing through from the outskirts of physics to the inner realms of consciousness. And right now, so to me, the pondering is really about the word. So what the word means, whether, and when we say in English, mind, how do we use it? How is it possible to refine these concepts and at the same time to make them reality and experience reality? And that's why, of course, the Hindu wisdom teachings are really brilliant, because we can rejoin these, or we can recap this reality again. And well, the question is really about this, the prana, because I realize that it's very much, on one hand, it's very much in the forefront, meaning the body-mind, the health of the body, and the body-mind complex is very much in the forefront in the everyday life these days. And could you just share some more points? How, and thank you very much for the teachings with the mantra and the prana. So how the pranic flow, or how the mind could be opened, because right now in the introduction, you mentioned this very important notion that the mind should be also opened. And in what manner, or in what manners, in what ways would you suggest that, or point at that?
Well, yes, I was actually just falling into a beautiful reverie listening to all the points you were making, which is very well put, from the realm of physics all the way into the inner spirit. How do we open up the channels to that? And definitely words are some of those channels, act as conveyors along that, those three conveyor belts of the three major nadis, if you want to call them that. And Sushumna and Ida and Pingala, they call it. And the one up the center and the two going around, which the human spine rather emulates or demonstrates physically. but inside, within the realm of the mind and beyond, we have the need for words and thoughts, which of course one is the result of the other. Our thinking in Vedanta and other Indian darshanas, we go to the thought and the mind as being the source for the worlds. And words would convey that wisdom, either of a higher or lower nature, paravidya or aparavidya, that's called. So when we talk about the Dharma, we're nestling, you might say, in the paravidya, or at least in between the two, to act as a bridge into higher things. Because Shankar has said you have to merge the word, or these words with the mind, and then the mind with the intellect, and the intellect with the ego, and the ego with the witness, and the witness with the Atman. So we're seeing that there are many levels to our being there. Sometimes we put that in terms of physical, emotional, mental, psychical or psychological, and intellectual, philosophical, and finally all the way up to the spiritual plane, or inwards to the spiritual plane. So other great beings have pondered this and looked at the different levels of the human being and tried to open up channels, not only for themselves, but in great souls like that, for the whole collective mind. The Vyasti and Samasti, they call it, the individual and collective, and the cosmic mind too. We make connections inwards to them. So yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha ananda brahmana vidvan nabibeti kutaschaneti. I was just going through that in my mind this morning, ruminating on that particular sloka. And it says, it communicates to us that Brahman, which mind and words fall back in awe, unable to comprehend it, the one who realizes the truth of that Brahman destroys doubt and fear forever. And so it is. So the rishis have put that down in the teachings, just like connecting word to mind, to intellect, and to witness, to remind us that there are such things as the depths of our beings, and that these connections are there. Perhaps we can say that they've been blocked by grantis as the ages commence, the age of light to the age of darkness, and the cycle begins again. But hopefully in these cycles, maybe even in 3 lifetimes, as the Buddha says, or even 1 lifetime, if as Vedanta would want it, that we would awaken up to this trap of cyclic thinking and get off the chain of birth and death, snap the chain of birth and death. And so words can, like almost anything else in relativity, can either bind or they can free or liberate. So we want to use these words to break bondages that are maybe sometimes age-old, or responsible for the chains, that ropes that bind us into these cycles, say with the ancestors, the Pitri Loka, and how that's going on within us all the time. All worlds are actually within us. So even our founder Lex Sixon used to say that these, if you look outside and see this world, you're just really seeing your own thought. Everything here is made concretized thought. Objects are just concretized thought. So in this way, if you get together some several billion souls and they start thinking about a particular world, then that's going to come about. And you also find as you watch that process that there are some souls that want to get off that ship that collected so many barnacles and was going around in circles habitually. So mundane human convention is taking people on these habitual rounds of daily work and daily life, forgetful of the beauty of the Lord. Pain sends them on towards God sometimes, but God's beauty should draw them. So in order to awaken up to that beauty, then we need to open up these channels using words in a higher and deeper way. But then again, we have to remember that the force that draws us is really beyond words and beyond thought. Because words and mind fall back in awe from that Brahman once they see it. Nevertheless, as we had last week's God blog, when Sri Ramakrishna said putting on colored glasses was a good analogy for how he felt when he came out of samadhi. He had Brahman glasses on at that time, so he came out of samadhi and that bliss that the mind had fallen away in awe, and he gathered back his mind. And then he looked and saw the trees and the grasses and so forth, all tinged in a very beautiful way with the color of Brahman. Put on Brahman colored glasses, he said. It's like looking through the lens of that everything was influenced by the Lord. And so in that way, that bliss permeates everything if we can reach it. The Upanishads say that too. Our corn is showering bliss upon us. Our cows showering bliss upon us. Our children showering bliss upon us. Well, it sounds like we could use some of that in this age. Some illumined youth. And that means we'll have to be illumined ourselves so that we can, when they're born here, we can remind them right away about the nameless, formless essence which is within them. And then coming down to the station that all beings understand it, speak to them these higher words of Dharma that are pregnant with this bliss, but also covered by ignorance. Knowledge is covered, like Krishna says in the Gita, like smoke is covered, like smoke covers fire. So it has to be brought forward. The covering power, is called avarana shakti. And then there's a distorting power called vikshepa shakti. So the covering power, like green scum over a lake, has to be brushed away with an act of will. So the human will is very important to begin, but we can't leave it as some schools of thinking do, and in the hands of willpower. We have to go towards intelligence. Intelligence is higher than will. So the will that offers itself, sacrifices itself, surrenders itself to the mother of wisdom, for instance, then all of a sudden they'd be at that particular mind would be at the level of imbibing wisdom, and the exerting of one's personal will would become less and less necessary, as Sri Ramakrishna's life and other great souls, like Ramana Maharshi, for instance, had experienced themselves in this age. Right on there in the 1800s into the 1900s, we had these really great souls come as if they knew the age was declining, because Krishna knew that too about the time of the battlefield at Kurukshetra, the Gita, so forth. He knew that an end of a particular yuga was on the way. So he's preparing people, and particular people were key to that. And they'll form models for everyone for the coming cycles. Just like ignorance sets in and becomes habitual, so does wisdom. So we have to focus upon that and do away with the covering power and to clarify the distorting power. And then there's this beautiful prakasha shakti, it's called, which is revelatory power. So instead of complaining about or suffering under the regime of covering power and distorting power, we should go towards the revelatory power of prakasha shakti and propitiate her. And words are one of her favorite ways to do that. That's why she's called the Vak Devi. Vak means word. So go to the very goddess herself if you want freedom from ignorance and the dawning of wisdom to come about. By your smile, I see that it looks like you enjoyed that. I enjoyed what you said too. Enjoyed in an exquisite way, as Swami Vivekananda said. Oh, people are always out there enjoying, but nobody knows the secret of exquisite enjoyment.
Babaji, in some readings this week, namaste. In some readings this week, I came across an observation by the writer that Shankara, he was reflecting on how people are apt to say, well, the world is unreal because, the philosophy shows us that it's a dream or it's a temporary manifestation. It's unreal because it has no existence of its own. But he was making the observation that Shankara did not emphasize the unreality of the world. Instead, he emphasized the unreality of the ego. And that really caught my attention. Whether or not that's kind of peculiar to his conclusion about Shankara's works or not, I'm not going there. I'm just kind of looking at this juxtaposition of not focusing on the unreality of the world, but focusing on the unreality of an individual self that then projects itself through the mind and has all these reactions and tussles with the world. And then you were mentioning Avarana Shakti, the veiling power, and how and so I was remembering too, in the Vivekachudamani, Shankara says that if you want to get rid of the distorting power, you have to get rid of the veiling power. And then just this week, you were saying how the ego has two powers, the veiling power and the distorting power. So the whole thing kind of came together for me as, the whole one needs to work at the source of the issue. So I'm just bringing that up as a point of discussion.
Yes, very true. It always reminds me of a grander conclusion, maybe that some beings have had. Like, for instance, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna who came here to the United States and founded the San Francisco Vedanta Society, helped run it after Swamiji had been there, was on the verge of passing away, and he happened to be in an ambulance, and he came out of his unconscious state on the way to the hospital, and he said, the world is, Brahman is real, the world is also real. So most Vedantists would say Brahman is real, the world is unreal, but when that neti path that Vedanta prescribes, not this, the weeding out of the garden of the mind turns into iti, all this, then that's where you can go to that fact that the world, being an expression of Brahman, because your practice has caused you to see through the veiling power and the distorting power. If you want to call that Thomas and Rajas, you've transcended that particular vibration of the gunas of nature, and you're fast approaching this even balance, sattva, the light of sattva or balance. At that point, then, one would see the world as being real because it's an expression of Brahman, rather than, say, maybe an illusion, or other words you could use for it, like a reflection. That beautiful teaching of the moon reflecting in a mud puddle, it may, to a naive child, might be the real moon, but if you reach out and touch it and the water ripples, you see the moon ripples, you see it was all just a reflection. So you walk away saying, that's not the moon. But to bring it full cycle, you would see that it's a reflection from the real moon in the sky. So the reflected moon has a very great import to the seeking soul. So the whole world is an illusion. That, if not shored up with this deeper level of understanding, you might say from illusion to reflection to expression, and expression to this oneness, that all is Brahman, like putting on Brahman colored glasses. I said that then you come out and you see the tree Brahman and the cow Brahman and the sky Brahman, and then those lines of demarcation between matter and spirit begin to dissolve. Maya matromidam, Dvaita paramataha, my teacher used to say all the time, one of his favorite quotes. Maya matramidam, Dvaita advaita paramataha. Those who think that there's a division between God and mankind, between nature and spirit, between creature and creator, they know not. They're still working on it, you might say. Until that vision of oneness, or better said, probably not two-ness, comes about, and then that dual mind will give way to pure mind, or Buddha mind. And pure mind is God, Sri Ramakrishna said. So what is it we have to get out of the way that's in the mind, as I started out saying this morning? Those barnacles on the sailing ship of the mind that are keeping us from opening that third eye to see everything as not two, or as integrated or naturally synthesized. That samadhi is called sahaja samadhi, very natural state where you see God in everything and everything in God. Shri Krishna leads us through 3 levels of that in the Gita. They are not in me and I am not in them, early on. So really a painful thing to hear, and you wonder about it. Later on, he's talking about people who come closer through knowledge and through love. And then he starts giving you these deeper teachings on it. I am not in them, but they are in me. Finally, later he says, I am in them and they are in me. Those beings who love me first and foremost. I am in them and they are in me. So he leads us through these different levels of a seeker who is by degrees opening up that third eye, or the Agya chakra. It's called Jnana Chakshu. Well, at that time, then God is real and the world is also real. In the meantime, what you're saying about the ego is more to the point. The ego is really a part of 1/4 of the mind, of the fourfold mind, and the other 2 or 3/4 are called intellect, and then dual mind, and then chitta, the thoughts. So if the ego can ripen and get all of those 3 on its side, intelligence is honed, and the thoughts are made pure and directed towards Brahman. And the dual mind is made non-dual by the opening of the third eye. Then the ego ripens. So all 4 of the antakarna, the inner cause of things, the fourfold mind, get purified and refined. And then that's that no mind, or Buddha mind, or pure mind. We talked about it in our seminar recently that we were at Satya Samanya, Vishishta calls it, or Chit Shuddhi. So those are wonderful, deep, profound things to ponder. It seems like Dharma comes from the qualified non-dual position, wants to give teachings that can inspire and get people beyond the limitations that they're feeling in themselves, in others, in the world, in life. But if you can create a sort of taste for non-duality, even though it might seem a little impossible at first when you first hear it. I and my father are one, Aham Brahmasmi kind of teachings, with all the imperfections that are in the way everywhere and in everything. But you know that the imperfections are really in the external and in nature, and that the Atman is always perfect. So if you have that as your pole star, and then your ship, you can guide your ship by that pole star towards the innate perfection and away from the imperfections, which are part of that unreal world that you're renouncing. And in order to get to this, around to the business of dissolving the line of demarcation between God and nature, seeing it as one flow, and living in that in peace and in bliss.
Namaste, Babaji.
Namaste, Matt.
I just had the question that came up kind of from my own studies, but also as I'm listening here. And could you just clarify, is there a difference between cosmic mind and pure mind, or are those just synonyms?
Yes, I believe there are subtle distinctions and differences at a very high level of consciousness like that. The Mahat, the great mind, we know how important it is as a matrix or as a pivotal place, because Mahat is synonymous with terms like Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, or what I started out today with the chant. The very first word we had this morning was Haran Maye. So Hiranyagarbha is that cosmic egg. In very ancient times, they looked at the entire universes, that is, because they never believed in just a physical universe alone. So they had this idea of the cosmic egg, or the Hiranyagarbha, a mass of consciousness. And that would be also very well exemplified by the Mahat. Also, the word It'd be very hard to separate Om from Mahat. It's like the primal bijam. It's Sri Ramakrishna said Om is the bijam for Brahman, and Shrim is the bijam for Shakti. So Om and Shakti has a few other bijams too there, of course, but Brahman has that one word as its matrix or as its reflecting point. And there we have the back to Imre's points. He was interested in words. So this one primal word or seed bijam of all is there within the Mahat, and is like a pool of potential that Divine Mother breathes upon. Interesting that both the breathing upon the waters that's mentioned in the Old Testament and the Divine Mother breathing upon the waters in the Rig Veda are seen. These two different religions are describing the same thing when they talk about darkness and light, where there was darkness in the beginning and all of a sudden there was this great light. So you have references like that in all religions. And so you come back to the Mahat as a very important pivotal place for souls that are coming in to form and then leaving and moving back into formlessness, all under the auspice of the Divine Mother who guides them. Father of Yoga, he wasn't particularly known as a Divine Mother devotee. He was known for yoga, but there in the sutras he goes into in the middle and at the end of the Yoga Sutras, talking about the Chitti Shakti, the mother of our thoughts, and how she guides us away from the worlds of name and form. That means objects and physical things, into the inner realms, which are consisting of thought, like in our dreams, consist of thought, the dream body, and from thoughts beyond into merging. And he says she gives us our final liberation. So he waits in the Yoga Sutras to the fourth pada to introduce that idea of the Chitti Shakti, Kaivalya Swarupa Pratishta. He says that final liberation of Kaivalya is made steady, pratistam, as the soul is shown its essence, Swarupa. And then it receives its final liberation, its eternal emancipation. So, passing through the cosmic mind as the soul journeys inward is the journey that souls who are seeking the highest liberation, or what Lord Buddha called Paragatam, the supreme goal. Keep your eyes on the prize there as you go through all the yogic practices and the different levels of mind that you move through to the highest level of mind, which is the Mahat, the great mind. So that's a good meditation to have, meditating on the Mahat. In fact, Father of Yoga says that's one of the greatest of all alambanas. He talks about alambanas, that fire, earth, air, water, and ether are stations for meditation. Isn't that much different than the way we're looking at them on the physical level with the ordinary human mind? We almost take them for granted, or might study them individually and gather resources and base our occupations and make money on them. But we never think that maybe we should meditate on them as manifestations of the Brahman, that is basically effects of a cause, of a greater cause. So the whole cause and effect chain, thought within, that's called involution. It's a good word for it. It's a good thing we have a word like that in English. involution instead of just evolution. So if you add involution into the equation, which is what all of us have been longing for since we were born in this Western hemisphere at the time of a fall in Christianity, then that really calls out to us that there's a source, that you can return to a source, and you're not just left here with the body and death and suffering as the end result of life, which you were too naive to see when you were young, but which became more apparent as you aged. So the involution process, you meditate on these alambanas in order of ascension and descension, or evolution and involution. Sancharaha prati sancharaha, he said, Lord Kapila says, there's a manifestation of tattvas going outwardly from the source, and then there's a return, withdrawal of the tattvas going back to the source. So those principles are in you, and you're the sentient part of all of it, and those are insentient, and it'd just be like getting across a river by stepping on stones. If the stones were not there, then you couldn't make a return trip to the other bank. So the soul leaves a trail of breadcrumbs behind it when it comes from formlessness, and will turn and retrace its steps. That's called, like I said earlier, dissolution of the mind, or take it back. Everything you said with words, take it back, and go to that nameless, formless place where no words are spoken and where the mind falls back in awe, unable to comprehend that Brahman. But those who do comprehend that Brahman, they will shed fear and doubt forever. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace come unto all. May wisdom dawn upon all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified by the armor of love. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all.